Okay, so welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the next lab set that we have available for this module, and it is simply called Sunstone Familiarization. The idea is that you learn most of the important aspects of the way that you manage your cloud. So by this point in the lab set, you will have installed OpenNebula and you will have configured the host for you to start a virtual machine on it, and you will have built one of the virtual machines that you will need to use in your cloud. So this is a good point because now you have a virtual machine so you can play around and explore the functionality of Sunstone to figure out what sort of things you can actually do, what actions you can take in the web interface with regards to your cloud. So the most important aspect of it is the different available views that you will have in your cloud. So the first and most important available view is the admin view. So it's what you've been seeing so far, and it's what one admin sees when they log into the system. Yeah. So one admin has basically absolute control over the cloud, so they can do anything they like. They can change users, they can create other virtual data centers inside them, and little mini clouds inside it to manage everything, and so on. From that point on, you have different subcategories of users onto it that you can actually have. So you have the main cloud, which is managed by the one admin account, and then you can have different smaller virtual data centers, as we call them, inside that cloud that have their own groups of users in there. So out of those groups of users, you will have something that we call a group admin. So you will have an administrator user that is responsible for one specific virtual data center in there. So a specific part, a chunk of a portion of the cloud, if you will, that you have basically given to a specific group of people to use. That group will have a specific amount of resources, so a set amount of CPU, cores, memory available, hard drive, network connections, and so on. And what they will have available to use really depends on what resources you have allocated to that little sub-cloud, the virtual data center that you've created for them. So the group admin view will basically be able to do everything required for that group of users, but nothing vital to the cloud itself. If you think of it in different terms, if you were Amazon, then you are one admin. And if you have a company and that company rents some cloud space from Amazon, and there is an administrator in that company responsible for that cloud portion, that would be the group admin. Okay, so they can change anything they want inside the fixed resources that they've been given from their cloud provider, and then beneath them are the normal users of the cloud. So the end users, which essentially should really just be able to log in, have an interface to log in, and basically start up a virtual machine and run some software inside it. And of course, they should be able to do this from anywhere in the world that they are. Okay, now, once you sort out those different types of groups and views that you can see, and of course, yes, in the lab sheet there is this link that takes you to the documentation of OpenNebula, so you can actually see what they look like there, and you will see it in the labs as well anyway, so it's not that important. The other aspect of it is the operation of the virtual machines that we're building. You need to get your head around the whole concept of building a virtual machine and then running it, or running multiple instances, and what sort of states that virtual machine can actually be in the cloud. So for example, when you build your virtual machine, you'll see it running in OpenNebula. There will be a blue bar on the top that has various little icons with actions that you can take. So the actions that you can take vary. So for example, you can suspend something. So you have a virtual machine that's running and you can suspend it. So the state is saved. So it is essentially still live in the system. It's the equivalent of suspending a virtual machine, or I would say the equivalent of closing the lid on your laptop, if you like. Okay, it's still there, it's still running, everything is still there, it's just not processing any new information in it. You can also power off, which means that you power it off, so you essentially shut it down, but the virtual machine is still kept in the host. So when we say kept in the host, we mean kept in the virtualization hypervisor host in your cloud that it's allocated to. So remember, when we have our virtual machines, we build them out of templates and we instantiate those templates. So we start a virtual machine out of a given template. That virtual machine will be a copy of those images that make up the template. Yes, so the images will exist somewhere on the system, a copy of them will be created, and a specific host in your cloud will actually look after that virtual machine that's running. It will give it the CPU, the memory, the hard drive space that it needs in order to run as a virtual machine. So when we say kept on the host, it means that this virtual machine, in whatever state it's in, it's still locking the resources allocated to it on the host. So if your host can run 4 VMs, if you have 4 VMs that are in suspended or power off state, you will not be able to start a 5th one. Okay, because those VMs will already have the allocated resources and they will be using them. So you can stop a virtual machine, so that means that the VM state is saved and is taken to the system data store. So you might be using it, you wanna run some other hosts. So as I said before, because you won't be able to run anymore, you can actually stop a VM that will take it away from the host, and you know that you will not be using it straight away. It stores it onto the data store, and then you can recall it back from there in a paused or suspended state as such. You can undeploy a virtual machine, so this means that it's powered off and is taken to the system data store. So the operating system basically shuts down and then is taken off away from the running host itself, so it's not taking up the resources anymore. You can reboot, which obviously is a reboot, okay. You can also delete, which basically means it cleans the VM and it moves it to pending. So this means that basically the virtual machine is no longer running on the host, it's not taking any resources on the host, and it's cleaned any of the data that's not in a persistent hard drive in there. Because if you remember last week we talked about persistent and non-persistent hard drives in virtual machines. So any data that was in that virtual machine and it was written by a specific user, with this action it will be deleted. The operating system itself will not be deleted. Okay. Everything will stay the same. It only has to do with cleaning up contents of non-persistent hard drives on the virtual machine. And then finally, we have shutdown and delete. So shutdown powers off a VM, cleans the host, and the VM is removed from Open Nebula. So basically, if your machine fails to start or something like that, this is what you do. You get rid of it from Open Nebula and you take it back to the image data store, and then you have the image there and it's running, and you can start another instance of that virtual machine. So the red buttons, essentially the difference that they have with the other ones is that once you start it again, you're starting another new instance of the virtual machine. Delete means that the VM is immediately destroyed regardless of state, and it's recommended only for one admin. So when something goes wrong and your virtual machine doesn't start and says fail, you can basically delete it and do that, okay? Because you don't care about the contents of the operating system inside it itself. All right, so there are various ways that you can do this. So for example, when you are working on your machine, because you are one admin and you're trying to start up your virtual machines to run for the first time, if something goes wrong and they fail to start, the best solution is to actually just delete. Okay, because you need to clean everything up, make whatever changes you need to make, and then try and start it up again. Once it starts and it runs, and you're happy with it, then, even then, you can still delete it, because the first virtual machine that we're building has a persistent hard drive, so all the contents will stay there. So you don't need to worry about it, okay? Other actions that I want you to play around with in the lab so that you familiarize yourself with the interface is the storage. So I want you to see how flexible the virtual machines that you're creating actually are. So I want you to create a new storage, give it just 100 megabytes, so just a very small hard drive, essentially, and add this to your existing virtual machine and see what happens. And you can also go and delete it as well. So this action will help you figure out how you can do this. In the same way, you can add a network card. So you can create a new network card. You don't even have to give it an IP address or anything. So just create a network card with whatever characteristics you want it to have, and then on your running virtual machine, you can actually go onto it and attach a new NIC, a new NIC. You can also take a snapshot of a virtual machine. So essentially, it's making a backup of the virtual machine in the state that it currently is. So you can take that and keep it for backup if you like. And when we were building our virtual machines, if you remember on the CPU and the memory options, we chose to check a little box that said resize yes. This means that you can change the number of CPU cores and the amount of memory on the system as you like. So you can try doing it with a virtual machine running, try doing it with a virtual machine shut down or power off. Generally play around to see how you can actually make these changes and when it actually allows you to do it and when not. Another important aspect that you need to familiarize yourselves with is permissions. And the permissions don't only apply to the virtual machines themselves, they apply to all of the resources that you're using when you're running a virtual machine. So the network cards, the hard drive images, the templates, they all need to have the correct permissions. So when you're first starting out, the images that you create are created by the admin user, so they're only created so that they be run by the admin user. Later on, when you make more groups and users, if you try to run them as they are, they will not, because they will belong to one admin and groups will not have access to them. All right, so you need to make sure that the permissions on the network cards, the images, and the templates allow any user to actually start up and use them. Okay, so go into them and see what they look like and make them look like this basically. The next thing that you can do is to actually create some groups. So as an example, we will create a student group in our cloud. Okay, when you create a group in OpenNebula, it automatically asks you if you want to have a group admin about it. So if you create a group that's called students, it will create a students-admin user, and that will be the group admin. That will be the user that can actually manage the entire group in the cloud itself. Okay, so you can do this, and then you can create student accounts as well, as many as you like, and see how you can actually use them. So you can log out and you can log in as the group admin. So once you log in as the group admin, you will be able to see what permissions that group admin actually has, see what changes he can make to the system, see what resources they can manage and what not. Okay, and it's a good idea to take a screenshot, for example, of the one admin user's interface and the group admin user's interface and compare the two. So this way you'll be able to see exactly what the group admin cannot do, in relation to the one admin. And then once you do that, you can also finally log in as the normal user. So you can log in as the cloud user and see what that user actually gets. They should only be able to see a dashboard, so they should be able to see what resources are being used inside that group. Okay, and they should be able to start a virtual machine. Very important thing to note here, they can only start a virtual machine if it's not already running. So while you're playing around with the groups and users and everything else, the first virtual machine that you build in LabSit 3 is still instantiated and is still running. You will not be able to run it again. And in fact, if you click on it, on the bottom right corner, you will see little icons that have to do with the network card, the hard drive, the image template, and everything else. The image of the hard drive will be red, which means that it cannot be started because you already have one instance running of it and it is a persistent hard drive, so it can only be run once. All right, in order to start this virtual machine as a normal user, you will need to go back into one admin view and delete the virtual machine. Okay, so the instance of that virtual machine must not exist at all in one admin's view. So the virtual machine must not be on the host, must not be running, nothing, not used at all. Once you do that, you should be able to start the virtual machine as a normal user, log in, use it again, and see what you can actually do with the cloud itself and what you cannot. This LabSit in generally doesn't take that long to do. Yes, usually people finish it in an hour, hour and a half. All right. But what I want you to do is I want you to basically click on absolutely everything in all of the views. so that you learn your way around it. Okay, it's pretty much the same notion as learning how to use an operating system. So you need to know what actions you can take and what you cannot take inside OpenNebula. So if it tells you something, for example, you can go and easily find what it's talking about, so that you know how you can go to your images, to your templates and everything else, and make any changes that you might need to make. So in the last part, this is an optional part. You can choose and do whatever you like. Take a couple of screenshots and show us what you've actually learned that's extra and that might be useful for you in order to be able to use the cloud effectively later on. Okay, so it is a lab sheet that is a playground essentially, so it's a guided exploration really of the Sunstone interface. Okay, and the job of this lab sheet is for you to familiarize yourselves so that later on, when we actually do build our cloud, you'll know your way around the web interface and you can do everything that you need to do. Okay, any questions about all this? Right, nice and easy today. Thank you very much.